Hello, and welcome to the Grand Teton Music Festival's Backstage Pass, our weekly invitation to everyone who loves and supports this festival. Musicians who want to connect with musicians, performers who want to connect with our supporters and our friends in the audience, and to anyone who would like to be a part of the GTMF community. My name is Eva Capoletti Chow, and I'm a violinist with the orchestra. I have been coming as a member of the orchestra for almost 20 summers. And I am your co-host and happy to be co-hosting this series with my friend Jerry Howe.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Howe. I'm the Associate Conductor for the Grand Teton Music Festival, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And today we have in episode number 7, some wonderful guests, 4 bassoonists from the festival orchestra. And of course, we want to thank our wonderful producer and tech guru, Mike Richards, who is behind the scenes here, taking care of all of our tech needs. So thank you so much, Mike.
Very welcome.
And so, Eva, just hearing you talk about being with the festival, I was just thinking, I haven't heard the story about you being a violinist and sort of how you started with violin. Like, why did you pick the violin and not some other instrument?
Well, the story has been told to me because I started at a young age and I don't remember this to be the case, but I kind of believe it. So apparently one of the kids in my kindergarten class was in the Suzuki Method program that was in this small rural town in Ohio where I'm from. And he came and he played something and I just thought that was unbelievable. So I guess I came home and I said to my parents that Lauren Kaneshigi, if you're out there, Lauren Kaneshigi, you changed my life. I don't even know if he's still playing. But anyway, I do remember that I thought he was cute, so I don't know if that part had anything to do with it, but definitely his playing did, and I said I wanted to start, and that's actually what began my lessons and being a part of the Suzuki class with him. What about for you? When did you start knowing that you wanted to conduct? I know you played French horn first.
Not French horn, trombone.
Oh, I'm sorry, trombone.
Well, conducting came quite a bit later. I mean, for me, trombone started in junior high school. I was in band, and this was 8th grade, and I wanted to play trumpet, and I could not get a sound out of the instrument. And so they gave me a choice between trombone and baritone. And so the trombone looked so much cooler than the baritone. So that's how I started on trombone.
That's
and
cool.
Where I grew up, there was no orchestra. So I didn't have a chance to actually do anything with strings or anything like that. So this was in a small town in Arkansas. So I didn't hear orchestra live until I almost graduated from high school.
Wow.
So,
that I had no idea.
Yeah.
So that's actually a short amount of time before you went from, wow, I like orchestra to, wow, I want to conduct the orchestra.
Well, that came quite a bit later because I spent a lot of time playing, and it wasn't until I had an injury and I had to stop playing that I really took to conducting seriously. So I wasn't one of those that saw somebody on the podium and thought that's what I wanted to do. No, it definitely came later, and it's just something to for me just keep on being involved in music and such. Speaking of choosing our instruments, we have some wonderful guests today, and we are going to see how they chose their instruments, the bassoon.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. So wonderful to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for GTMF Backstage Pass. Normally, we have everybody just sort of give us a little bit of introduction. So if you could tell us where you are, how long you've been with GTMF, and we all know that we all play bassoon, so we don't have to worry about that. So, Sue, could you start us off?
I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I honestly don't know exactly how many years, maybe 8 or 9, something like that. I'm kind of dependent on that program every summer that lists how many years you've been coming.
Andrew, you're next on my screen. Could you tell us about yourself and where you are, so forth?
Sure. So I'm in Atlanta right now, and I believe this would have been my either fourth or fifth season at GTMF.
Chris, you're next.
Hi, so I'm in Ottawa, Canada, where I have lived for 15 years, and I've been coming to the Tetons for 19 summers, I think.
Wow.
And many summers before that, because my wife, the flutist Camille Churchfield, attended back in the 70s. And I first heard the orchestra, I think, in the late 70s when she was playing in the festival, and we made many trips. So it's always been in my heart to get down to Wyoming.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. And Kristen.
Hi, I'm in Naples, Florida. And this would have been my 27th season, so I've got y'all beat by a little bit. I also was a student at the festival back when they had a student seminar. So I'm very familiar with Jackson, and I sure miss it this summer.
Yeah, I'm certain that we all do, especially those of us are in hotter climates right now, are really missing the beautiful weather there in Jackson. One thing that I wanted to sort of kick us off with is Eve and I were just talking about how we started on our instruments, or how we picked our instruments. And I was wondering, since all of you chose bassoon, if you could share with us a little bit about how that came to be. Was it something, did any of you want to play bassoon from a very young age, or is it something that you came into by accident or something like that?
I really didn't want to play the bassoon from a young age. No, and I mean, I have to tell you this true story of grade 2. Mrs. Bailey was my grade 2 teacher. And this is burnt into my psyche, this event. I can close my eyes and still relive this moment. She was holding up pictures of instruments of the orchestra. And, you know, everybody knew what a trumpet was. Everybody knew what a violin was. And she holds up a picture of the bassoon, and no hands went up. And finally, I put up my hand, and Mrs. Bailey says, "Yes, Christopher, can you identify that instrument?" And I said, "Mrs. Bailey, that's a baboon." And the entire class broke into laughter, and it was like a scar tissue over my heart. So how ironic it was that I ended up spending my life as a bassoonist. I don't know. True story.
Wow. Kristen, how about for yourself?
Well, I have another sort of odd story, I guess. I'm quite a bit younger than my older sisters, and both of them played bassoon. One went on professionally, and the other was a music teacher, a junior high band director. But by the time I got into elementary school and I was old enough to take an instrument, I had played piano for a long time, and they gave us some kind of music aptitude tests. I forget, what questions were on there, but basically I got 100 on the test, and they said, "Oh, you are a good musician. You should play bassoon or oboe. Which one do you want?" And I didn't like the sound of the oboe, and I didn't want to play what my sisters played. So I said, well, I'd rather play the flute. So I did that for a year just to be different, and then they came back to me again and kind of wore me down. And finally I gave in, and I said, okay, I'll bring a bassoon home. And I guess my parents nearly died of a heart attack, because now they have 3 girls in their house that need an instrument, and it's fairly expensive. I'm sure they were wondering what in the world, But I knew that it sounded good at least, and I took to it pretty quickly, and the rest is history. So.
Wow, 3 bassoons. That's
we
quite
call
something.
it a genetic defect in our family.
And Sue, how about yourself?
So that's somewhat hilarious to me, the idea of taking up flute to be different. Because I think I took up bassoon because I wanted to do something a little bit different. I have 2 older siblings who were playing instruments, and it was just like, I'm not going to play what they play. So I wanted to play something different, and the bassoon seemed cool. And when I mentioned that as a possibility, of course, the music teacher's like very delighted that somebody's volunteering to play the bassoon, because they had like 1, I think, and she was about to graduate middle school. So like within 2 weeks, I was playing in the orchestra, playing second bassoon on Beethoven Symphony. So, I mean, abridged version for high school, but like, that's pretty cool. You kind of randomly take something, then in 2 weeks you're playing Beethoven.
And Andrew, how about yourself?
So I also have older siblings, 2 sisters. My oldest sister plays saxophone, and my middle sister plays clarinet. So we had an extra saxophone laying around at the house, and I enjoyed hearing my sister playing and practicing when I was younger. So I started on saxophone, played that for years, and then I was at a band clinic, and I was sitting behind a bassoonist, and I just thought it looked cool. So obviously when you're in a band of like 140 people or whatever, there's no way you're going to hear the bassoon, even if they're sitting right in front of you. So I just thought it looked cool, looked into it, thought it would be a challenge, and that's why I started, because I wanted to be weird and different.
So yeah, definitely a common theme here, to be different, and also you're all high-functioning musicians, because I think it's always the bassoons and oboes are going to the people who are exceptional musicians with exceptional hearing. So that's great.
So first of all, we should say hi to a bunch of attendees that are here. We have Amy Gigglovich, Andy Mahoney's back, Bonnie Blackenship, who, by the way, asks, how do your cats feel about you practicing at home so much now? So that may be a question. Neil Churchfield, Carolyn Fenn, and Emily Winslet, Faye Williamson, Paul Murphy, Peter Benelil, and Susan Galkis Asadi. So the most recent question that we got for you is, what orchestral piece, when you see it planned on an upcoming season schedule, makes you break into a cold sweat as a bassoonist?
Who wants to go first?
That's from Jeff Counts, by the way.
Is this so you can program it and make a
Yeah, exactly.
Notes in the back. I have one on my stand right now, actually. If we end up going back to work in the fall, we have the Barber Violin Concerto programmed, and the last movement in that is extremely fast. I think it's 192 to the quarter note. That's the metronome marking, and it's very awkward. And so I've already pulled that out, and I'm like, I better get used to this now, and work it up. It takes a while to get it up to speed. So
Definitely Tchaikovsky 6. That's the
Like
one
6?
for me.
Wow.
It was between that and Mrs. Alumnus for me, which is one that doesn't come up in your season very often. But yeah, so we actually, it was my third week here in Atlanta, I think. And Donald was here conducting Mrs. Alumnus. And it was my first time playing in that piece and just getting my bearings in the orchestra. And I would rather play Beethoven 9 twice than playing Mrs. Alumnus, because it's just such a marathon. But yeah, so after we played it that week, I was like, oh, that's great. Like, it'll be another 8 years, 10 years before I see it. We were scheduled to play it, actually in April of this year. And then, of course, things got canceled. But that piece definitely makes me break out in a cold sweat.
Something of Mozart, probably Jupiter Symphony. So we're all addressing our own particular foibles and concerns. And for me, especially as, shall we say, a mature bassoonist, can I put it that way? Getting older. And one of the things that happens as we get older, pretty universally, is that fast articulated passages, tonguing passages, become more and more difficult as you get older, because the tongue muscle starts to slow down. So the last movement of Jupiter Symphony, the coda of the last movement of Jupiter Symphony has 16 bars in it. And if you're a music lover, you know that this kind of represents the sine qua non of Western civilization. I love Shakespeare, but that ain't the end of the Jupiter Symphony. There's just nothing like those 16 bars. So I kind of feel that that entire last movement, which has a few passages which really are tricky to play cleanly and quickly, I feel that I do a disservice to one of the great pieces if I don't get it right. And here's a really odd thing. The last thing I played before the world went into a pandemic shutdown was the Troubadour Symphony. So there's some message that the universe is giving me there.
It's great seeing everyone's reactions as each of you say what your worst demons are on the instrument, because it seems like a surprise for each of you. So it's really hilarious to see.
I actually have a Tetons related story with Jupiter. So it was my first summer there, I believe. And I don't know if you all know Jay Christie, violinist. He's with the ASO, and he's been doing Tetons for I don't know how long, but he's very adventurous. He hikes, has summited, I think, a few of the peaks there, and does all kinds of crazy outdoor stuff. So I figured that I, along with Liz Tishone and Zach Collins, I believe, we were going to do some kayaking. And it was at a time in the summer where the water, this was just Snake River, but it was super, super high ice melt. And there had been signs posted like at the bathroom Liz went to go, and she saw a sign that said, "Be very careful, there's been like a few deaths out on the river so far this summer." And so we go out immediately after like Haircut Rock, I think it's called. Zach and Liz are out of the water and like they're done. It's they're just toast, don't want to go on. Jay and I make it. We keep going down the river, and there's a group of like high school volleyball team or something that's doing group training. And they let them get on one of their bigger boats, make it almost all the way. And then the last rapid before our takeout point, I just totally eat it. And I was stupid enough to forget to put in my contacts that day, so my glasses are somewhere at the bottom of the Snake River, forever lost to me. But yeah, it was scary. And then like my boat was over here somewhere, and Jay was trying to pull me up into his boat, which, pulling up a rather large man into a boat in the middle of a river that's going, super fast. That's a little hard. So it was quite scary. And then that night we were supposed to play Troubadour Symphony, and I was just like, you know what? If I can survive that crazy experience in the river, then Troubadour is nothing. So that's what I think about anytime Troubadour comes up now. It's just so if you get an invite from Jay to go do something, just be very careful, very cautious.
Maybe we need to have like all the craziest hikers show or something like that. Sue Heineman would be right in there, actually, as I'm saying that.
I don't want to brag, but with the one time I hiked with Jay, he threw up and I did not. Just saying.
Normally when we all are in the Tetons, hiking is such a big deal for what we're doing when we're not making music together. But since we're not there, unfortunately, and what are some of the things that you've been pursuing, some of the passions that you have that we don't know about? I've been following some of you on social media, so I know that, for example, Sue, do you want to tell us about your big runs and all the cats you've been fostering?
They're very cute when they're sleeping. Yeah, they're all crashed out. So, I will rotate this, but I'm happy to grab a few. That's a part of the kitten area. Right now we have, this litter is 6 kittens with a mama. And then at the other end of the house, I have another room where we have some other foster cats. And usually I can't do it because you have to commit to a litter of kittens with the rescue that I work with. You have to stick it out all the way to their adoption because they don't want them moving around. It's unhealthy for them. So in this time of year, I'm just always traveling. So this is actually the first summer I've ever fostered kittens.
That's great. And Kristen, how about yourself? How are you guys doing?
We're coping. Every day I kid with my husband, Matt. Today I feel, like I could do quite a bit, and I tackle new projects. I finish old projects. I'm pretty productive, and then the next day I'll be like, I wish I were back at work, or, so I have a lot of this kind of thing day to day. But we're doing well. I spend a lot of time outside if I can. Of course, Naples is right on the Gulf of Mexico, so barring any hurricanes, it's really nice to go walk on the beach, and we have some really nice wildlife here. In fact, we have a new alligator that's kind of moved into the neighborhood. There's a lake down the road from us, and we have a posted sign, to be careful. So that's something I don't see in Wyoming. And then I just spend time in my garden. I've grown a killer crop of carrots this year. So I've been making a lot of carrot soup and things like salsa with our tomatoes and doing more cooking.
That's great. That's great. I know that, yeah, I think when you're saying that you have your ups and downs, everyone we've talked to has sort of been riding the waves, feeling times when they're really productive and times when, they don't want to practice at all. So I'm sure we're all together in the same boat. I wanted to ask you, Andrew, actually, there was a request from the audience to ask you about your recorder artistry that you've been
I saw that. Thanks, Juan. Yeah, I mean, that's been a hobby of mine for a while. Mainly when I don't want to work on reeds anymore. Or, if I just want to do something musical without having to be so critical about it. And I'm a huge fan of Baroque music. And that was kind of the heyday of the recorder. I've been making some videos of, 9 or 10 of me playing recorder.
Try to keep up. And don't get in my way. No. Come on, do it. Come on.
Yeah, so that's it's a fun hobby. I might be picking it up more. We'll see. I think these a cappella videos are an okay stand-in. The challenging thing is it's so hard to record yourself. I've done a couple. Oh, hi, Kitty. So I've done a couple projects of recording myself, and it's all patched together. And especially for like longer works, it can be so hard to get a good take. And of course, when it's recorded, you're way more critical of yourself because you have that archival thing to listen back to and just nitpick everything. So they're frustrating. I appreciate that they're really nice things for our followers and audience and all the people that support us to see. It's just a lot of work and not nearly the amount of connection that we're used to establishing and experiencing.
How about you, Chris? Both you and your wife, Camille, are usually at the festival right around now.
Camille and I are very fortunate. We have a very, very beautiful cottage less than an hour drive away in the woods in Quebec. Where I live in Ottawa, it's right on the border of Ontario and Quebec, if you know your geography. So from my home, it's a 3-minute drive to be in the province of Quebec. And then we get up and we have a couple of acres in a beautiful place on a pristine lake, wooded lake, absolutely beautiful. And I'm usually spending a lot of time there in June. And then in the middle of July, the days start to creep up and I say, oh God, I have to go down to work, which I want to do and I love doing, but it's always hard to tear myself away from this kind of idyllic spot. So this summer, of course, no travel across the border, as you all know. The Canadian-US border is closed anyway. So I'm spending a lot of time basically trying to keep what Andrew and Sue talked about this, the up and downs, trying to find the level keel with what I'm familiar with and spending time feeding chipmunks and getting a chainsaw out and, kind of just sort of bucolic things like that. It has a great way of making me feel like life is completely normal. I suppose all of us are looking when possible. I'm very extremely fortunate to be able to have this outlet, but when we have possibilities of finding ways of feeling normal in a situation like this where the entire world is so abnormal.
Yeah.
So I just feel blessed that I have that opportunity.
And just to be clear, the chainsaw isn't for the chipmunks, right?
No, it's for my reeds, Kristen.
One thing I wanted to ask you is sort of we're in this midway point through the summer and the fall is on the horizon. And what do you think it's going to be like in the fall, going back to making music?
I'll weigh in.
Please, Chris.
All of us in the industry, all of us in the world are trying to keep abreast of the changing evolution of understanding about what this pandemic means and what is possible and what's not possible. I think it's realistic to think that for our orchestras, normalcy is going to be a 2 or 3 year period. I really think that as optimistic as we can be, and all going to do our best to support our managements and our colleagues in doing what we can, as long as audiences are feeling somewhat concerned, and as long as we have uncertainty about levels of reinfection and second waves and third waves and all, we have to take a very long view, because I think our institutions will take a long time to return. And I'm not sure that we're going to return to exactly the same models. I think the audiences, the culture, the technology are all evolving to the point that some of what we do will be forever altered. So, I think it's very hard for us just to know what 2 weeks is going to look like and what September is going to look like. We don't know. We all aim for optimism, but I think we have to be realistic too, that it's going to take a long time.
We can't really plan because we don't know what we're planning for. Kristen, or would you like to speak to that? What's going to be like?
Well, assuming I go back to work, my first day would be August 31st. And typically our orchestra begins our season doing a lot of educational programming where children and middle schoolers, high schoolers are bused to our concert hall for different programming. It's age geared toward the age of the child. So I suspect if we can spread out, even though there's not an audience, and perform those either taped or make a Zoom broadcast for their classroom, I expect that we'll be doing things like that, virtual concerts for the young people.
One thing that makes playing at GTMF so special is the hall and the proximity in which the audience sits so close. I mean, you could see their faces, you can see their reactions to so much of what we're doing. When we do go back, we'll be sort of in more of a physically distanced, smaller orchestras. Are there going to be some pieces that you might miss playing, or we'll be playing lots of Jupiter symphonies maybe, but we won't have Mrs. Solemnis for a while because we won't have a choir, unfortunately.
What we will get is probably a lot of Pulcinella, and that doesn't come around nearly often enough. So excited! Oh, we don't like that either.
I love it. I love it. I love to play it.
I can just say, this isn't exactly the same question you're asking, but I'm sad about not being able to be a spectator to things like this, because I go to the opera all the time, and like opera is probably going to be even slower to come than symphonies.
I think there's an opportunity to seek out works that aren't done much by marginalized composers, female composers, composers of color, or commission works from those people, just so it adds to the variety and depth of our repertoire.
No, absolutely. It's a chance to try a lot of new things that normally don't come up, because we're always trying to get all 100 people, or however large our orchestra is, to be on stage. And we're certainly going to miss that, at least for a little while.
Chris was asked kind of directly, when do you think people will feel safe to be in a large crowd together?
There are several facts that we have to recognize with symphony orchestras. One is that the general demographics of our audiences are older, and older audiences are a little bit more concerned about their immune system and their general safety. Although it would be wonderful if symphony orchestra audiences were all 30 and under, they never have been, they're never going to be. So we're always going to have a little bit of an extra hurdle in getting more mature audiences to come back in. I think some of those mature audiences are going to start to feel comfortable if they're not crowded in and if they're able to wear masks. And I think the big challenge for the orchestra musicians, and as bassoonists, we're on the wrong end of the stick for this, is that I do think that wearing masks in performance among string players, percussionists, pianists is going to be possible. And I think you're going to see possibility of a Dvorak string serenade way before you're going to see anything involving winds and brass, because there's a basic problem. There's a whole lot of studies going on right now. One that was just issued a couple of days ago, doing Schlieren photography of showing weight of particles and What is the amount of air that gets cleared? All of the technologies involved in making the environment safer will all contribute in as yet uncertain ways to gradual step-by-step increases in audience's sense of safety. I do think that in our business, we have said, it's been a motto of the Musicians Union for decades and decades, live music is best. We all grew up to say that. We've all promoted this. It's part of our marketing. It's part of our core belief as musicians that live music is best. One of the good things about the limitations of the technology that Andrew has talked about was it really kind of proves that live music is best. Because this simulacrum of reality that we have when we have Zoom screens full of 80 people playing 1812 Overture is that there is, phoniness is too strong a word, but the lack of real human interaction has got to be striking a lot of people. So I'm kind of hoping that the fact that technology, as good as it is, and although it's allowing us all to communicate through video calls and Skypes and Zooms, it's not yet at the point where we can actually interact in real time as musicians. I think it's a fortunate thing. I think that in 5 years' time, with increased bandwidth and the improvement in everybody's individual technology, it's actually going to be possible for us to play together online without a 1 second delay or a half a second delay. In the meantime, will audiences recall and remember and feel deep in their hearts the wonder of attending live concerts? Will they get back into the practice once they're all vaccinated, once we're all starting to become available again? It'll take a bit of time take a long time for those patterns of behavior and commitments to come alive again.
I think there's the notion of returning to normal that we hear a lot, and I don't know that that's really what's going to happen. I think we're gonna have to adapt to the new normal, is a better way of putting it. But I was texting with members of my section today, and Anthony Georgeson sent a meme or like a little picture talking about blowing on a birthday cake, and then we all eat slices of that, which is just something common that up until now anybody would just go to a birthday party, somebody blows the candles out, and you take a slice of that cake. That's not going to be a thing anymore. And like the same thing with working on students' reads and actually playing their instruments. There's just so much that is not going to be able to go back to normal. We're going to have to adapt. And then also, just speaking, I didn't want to speaking about the videos that are being made online. I didn't at all want to intimate that I don't think that they're a good thing, because I definitely still want to connect with all the people that are interested in our music and our community. So I think they're great, just not as great as live performance. And it's kind of a varying degree for the people that participated in them. I saw it in my Facebook timeline, a friend that was doing one where I guess there was a click track. And so they had to record it all the way through, but they played an instrument where they didn't really play it to like the last 20 seconds. And they were sitting there, waiting for their part to come in and hearing everybody else's takes. And it just kind of hit them like, I would be sitting in a group of 60, 70 other people right now, and it was almost like an anxiety, like panic attack. Like, this is just so not normal.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to experience that's similar to that, Andrew. And I was making a video. It was just the finale of Firebird, and going through the videos, and then I get to the percussion, and just seeing somebody with a triangle just sitting there listening to the click track go for 3 minutes and 15 seconds before it comes time to, and so it's definitely heartbreaking. As magical as it is to see those multiple Zoom squares playing together, and even there was a recent one of Mahler, and it's great to see that people are still trying to make music, but it's never going to take the place of what we do at our homes, and then what we do in the summers in Jackson.
Things that are really scary to think about is like, how do our institutions like bridge the gap between now and when they could return to any sort of money-making model? It's a little bit terrifying. A couple of weeks ago, some of my colleagues were playing on a porch in Capitol Hill, so I ran to Capitol Hill and I got to hear live music, and I was like, it was really overwhelming to actually hear humans. I've been actually practicing with a whole different mindset now, because it's like, I guess this is my new hobby. And when Andrew said that about like playing recorder and maybe wanting to do something without that much pressure, it's actually fun to do that with the bassoon, because like you're pretty skillful on the bassoon. But if you're trying to practice something and learn it not because you have a concert next week, it's pretty amazing. Chris and Kristen, what are you guys doing for practicing? Like, do you find you're going back to your same old routines, fundamentals?
I know that for me, Sue, I've pulled out a stack of etudes, some of which I've done before, some of which I've never seen. And just to keep it kind of fresh, if I'm feeling a little blue about, when am I going to work again, I'll just go one after the other. Some are super challenging. And what I've noticed is that it gives me some kind of a task, like, okay, I'm going to sight read through this one. And I found some really beautiful music that way that I didn't even know existed. So that's a plus. But also it just kind of keeps me in shape. But I do miss, I can't explain it. It's the chemistry of being in a large group. Because I could be the best bassoon player on the planet or the universe, and if I have no one to share my music with, what good is it really? And we feed off of each other, whether you're playing in a section with 6 bassoons or 2, and the woodwinds are a family, and you're playing within that family, and then the orchestra is a larger family. There's so much interaction and so much spontaneity in the music that you can make with your friends, because you're kind of riffing on what they're doing, or, Chris Millard is playing this dynamic. Oh, I'm going to try to, do that too. And there's so much collaboration, and that is what I'm missing.
Just to sort of speak to what all of you are saying, I just wanted to share one small clip of music. This is from a few years ago. It's a performance of Mahler 2, and I know that's something that we would have been playing this summer. Yeah.
This feels like a different world, like just from a different time.
Yeah.
I don't know about you all, but I was getting frisson, the shivers like crazy.
Yeah.
I've heard that piece so many times, but yeah. Oof.
I don't know if you noticed my F sharp was a little high.
I didn't want to say anything, Chris, but
we were gonna
You're
cut
so-
that.
Is there there?
You're so polite.
thank you so much for joining us, Sue, Kristen, Andrew, Chris. We are grateful for you sharing your time and sharing your thoughts and bringing us together, bringing us the memories of being in Jackson, a place that we all love so dearly. I know that a lot of people want to talk with all of you, and I invite all of you, all of our audience, and of course all of you, drink in hand, to join us at the Spur. I want to thank all of our audience thank you for joining us and taking the time to share this experience with us, listening to music with us, looking at the beautiful kitties, and we will see you next week on GTMF Backstage Pass. Thanks, everyone.